input from families. We rely upon input from medical providers. We rely on input from anybody who will talk to us in an objective manner, because we've got to look at it all. And let me tell you, it's not always so clear about what's the right path to take. But there is such a need for therapeutic interventions in family court on all levels. And Bristol-Cone Family Services and Step 2 are the substance abuse providers and the other agencies that we refer a lot of folks to, because that's the most regular issue that the family court sees. However, there are so many other issues. Parents with psychiatric disabilities, PTSD, suicide ideations, just general depression can have such an enormous impact on family court, whether it's temporary or lifelong. These issues need to be considered as a part of the decision making in the family court, and often they're minimized, and that doesn't help anybody. If somebody is on meds and they're doing well, we want to keep them doing well. I take allergy medication, and invariably, every 3 or 4 years, I think I don't have allergies anymore. And I stop taking my meds, and guess what? I have allergies. And same thing happens with mental illness. When people are on their meds, they can function. And when they're in a therapeutic environment doing their thing, life works a lot more easily. But at some point, people say, well, maybe I'm okay now. And they stop taking their meds. And then you start sneezing and drooling, and I have allergies. But every now and then is a lot better than every day. And never is even better than that. So family court has to work hand in hand with mental health court. And Judge Breen, if he ever drops dead, we're in a bad shape, because he's been a senior judge now for a long time. I don't see anybody being able to fill his shoes. My particular area of interest is in abuse and neglect. 432B cases is what they call it. And these children, whether they're infants or teens, who are removed from their homes because their parents are unable or unwilling to provide them adequate care, is where my heart lies. I've been a CASA, I've been the president of the CASA organization. I now am on the board of a foster care shelter in northern Douglas County that serves all of northern Nevada, because when a child is removed from their parents' home in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., we take an 18-month-old infant, we're going to be able to find a foster family to wake up and take that child in like that, right? Give me a 14-year-old boy with gauge in his ears, tattoos on his neck, who has substance abuse issues. You going to let that person in your house at 2 a.m.? Not many people will. There are those. I won't, because I have 9 and 10-year-old boys. Once my boys are 16 and towering over everyone else, then maybe. But Austin's house is the foster shelter that I'm talking about, the emergency shelter, and we often have kids for 3 days to 90 days, and the state pays the foster stipend for their care. And as I was saying to somebody, we can get that kid a dental consultation in like 2 days. Can we get him a therapist? Months. How wrong is that? Talk about grief and loss. Talk about feeling of depression and inadequacy and feeling like it's all their fault. Talk about the victimization of children. That 14-year-old with gauge in their ears and tattoos across their neck, all of those things are screams for attention to say, I'm just a kid. Somebody tell me not to do this anymore. Somebody care enough to notice. And we've been able to do exactly that at Austin's house. Not every time. Certainly we fail more than we succeed. But those kids are always welcome back, and often it's those teens that come back again and again and again in failed foster placements. Unfortunately, that's the reality of our community. But all of northern Nevada is my community, even though I serve in Douglas County, in Carson City, in Washoe County, Lyon County. Can only run for judge in one jurisdiction, and Washoe is the center of it. And actually, Washoe has 2,000 cases per family court judge new every year. And when you get assigned to a judge in family court, you stay. And that family is assigned to that department until every last child in that family reaches 18, or graduates from high school at 19, or is finally finished with the system at 25, if they have needs. That family stays with the court. So 2,000 cases, piece of cake. I can go through 2,000 cases in a year, no problem, I'm efficient. But I still have last year's 2,000 still on my docket, my caseload, and another 2,000 this year, and another, and another. So we look at our courts and we think, why does it take so long to get a hearing? Well, there's your answer. But judges have to be efficient, and judges have to find remedies that make sense for the people that they affect. If you just be, the person in the black robe on your throne throwing orders, people are resistant to incorporating those orders into their lives. But if you can involve people in fashioning their own outcomes, there's a lot more buy-in, and people don't come back to the court every year and get it modified. So those are my perspectives on family court. I would like to hear from you about family court and mental health and mental illness, and how the two can work together in our respective communities where we can collaborate instead of collide. The resources are slim. There's not a lot of money, but that doesn't mean there aren't things that can be done. Thank you, Joe, for inviting me here tonight. Oh, and before I forget, there are little handout cards. They have my telephone number on them and my email address. And I answer my phone and emails. And there are walk cards with one of the best pictures I've ever taken. I don't really glam up like this too often. And my family's on the back. My boys, Dean and Quinn, and my partner, Farrell, and just a little bit more about me. If you want to take a couple of these and share them with your friends and neighbors, I'd be delighted. I also have a trunk full of yard signs if everybody wants one. I have enough. But I don't want you to take one if you can't use it, because they're expensive. But I know that this community will participate in the election process. I've already heard that. I've earned votes of people I've never met. And I don't care if you vote for me because you're voting against the incumbent, or for me, or because I'm the female in the race, or because you like Italians. Whatever your issue is, I'll take your vote, okay? Because I believe that after 10 years on the bench, you start seeing people not as people, you see them as stories. Oh, you've heard that one before. Let me tell you, nobody has the same story as anybody else, and everybody deserves to be listened to. After 10 years, this is a burnout job. I don't know how people do family court for more than 10. I expect that I'll do my 6-year term, and I'll probably run for re-election to a second term, and then by the time that second term is over, my youngest will be finished with college, and I'll be ready to go into senior status, and I don't expect to do more than 2 terms. So, how can family court and NAMI work together, or how can family court and you work together, and what can I do to help? Everybody smiles. What?
I take a yard sign if I had a yard. I live in an apartment complex, unfortunately.
Well, that's very kind. The best thing you can do is tell somebody you met me and say, you met this lady at NAMI, and it made sense or it didn't make sense, whichever you decide, and share your experience, because the hardest thing for a candidate to do is to be sincere in their presentation of themselves to the voters. Now, I would believe a friend over a commercial. And commercials are really expensive, and it's cost me nothing to meet you.
And by the way, when I lived in Humboldt County, which is in the Redwoods,
yes.
Whenever I take my children to the park, which was adjacent to a redwood forest with hiking trails, we pick up litter before they
right
play.
on.
I never ask them to; they just help me.
I make it a contest. Who can pick up the most trash? And I have roll lifesavers or something awful like that, and it works. Boys are easy to motivate. But trash is great. it also gets you to look around instead of just, are we there yet? Good one. Anybody have anything to add to the family court discussion?
It may not, I'm just wondering how the family court looks at gambling addiction, which is not openly discussed or openly looked into, like drug addiction, alcoholism, and all that.
Well, let me tell you that the family court probably looks at gambling addictions a lot more than you might think when it affects the community property in a divorce or in a family circumstance. If I'm not paying child support because I have a gambling addiction, you can bet your boots that family court judge is going to be very interested. And addiction is addiction is addiction. There are services available, and sometimes somebody needs to be steered and counseled and supported toward changing their lives. And I believe that no matter what, a desire, success is less important than effort to me. An effort to do things differently counts a mile in my mind. And it has to be a sincere effort. And so there are people who aren't able to beat their addictions, but they at least learn about them, develop tools to cope with them, and intend to do it differently. And that's all we can hope for. You know, I wish I could make it all better, get a magic wand. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And drug addiction and alcohol and gambling and food and you name it, all the addictions that there can be, they all work the same way. And there are groups and there are programs. Anger management is another one. It's an addiction. Domestic violence is an addiction to power. It's all addiction, and addiction is addiction. We know, we as a society know how to approach addictions and to break the cycle. So family court pays attention to gambling when it affects other members of the family. Yes?
I don't know if this is the type of question that you would like to answer, but do you know what the repercussions would be of leaving mental health court and just going back to the municipal court with the sentence you have?
I really have no idea. It's going to depend on why you were sent, and mental health court is not someplace you can just walk away from. A frank and open discussion with the judge and the case management team is going to be your best bet in making a change. Making it unilaterally is probably a bad idea, and it has nothing to do with what I do. So my advice is worth exactly what you're paying for it. It's just my logic, though, and my experience with the court. You know, I think that in a lot of life circumstances that you want to change, the best thing you can do is just be right out there and be honest about it and ask for what you need. And sometimes you get it. Anybody else?
Mental health court, is that throughout the nation, or is that something that just Washoe County does?
Well, it's not just Washoe County. There certainly is mental health court, specialty courts in Clark County as well, but there's not, for example, in Carson City. In courts that have large enough populations to support the demand, the programs, the funding, the systems that are required for a program like that, it exists. And it's not unique to Nevada by any means, but urban areas have had mental health court for a long time. Our Veterans Court in Nevada, it's a model. It's a model. Our abuse and neglect program through Deborah Schumacher, who's retiring from the family court, and it's a tragedy, is a model. And the National Conference of Juvenile and Family Court Judges is housed right here in Nevada at the UNR campus. And they do a lot of great studies and model programs and seminars, and you know, there's no such thing as a new invention. Someone's already done it, and what we might do is improve upon it. And I believe that that's where our mental health court in Washoe came from.
I believe I read that there is about 200 mental health courts in the country.
I wouldn't be surprised. And I would guess that those mental, by the way, courts are generally organized around counties, So 200 mental health courts is not that many when you think of 50 states and all of the counties within those states. I mean, Nevada only has 17 counties, but
Ohio has 88.
right, Ohio has 88. So 200 is not very many, but it's a start. It's a start. How often, does anybody in this room had experience both in mental health court and in family court? Who here has ever had occasion to be affected personally by family court? With yourself or kids or grandkids?
Grandchildren.
There are no grandparent rights in Nevada, are there?
Oh, well, I have grandchildren.
Well, you have access to your grandchildren because your children are good people. But often we find that, people are, Joan Mack, Darren Mack is the person who shot Chuck Weller. Joan Mack went into court to preserve her rights as a grandma to have a relationship with her son's daughter. There are no grandparent rights in Nevada. And so the surviving family of this young girl refused to allow this grandmother to have access to her granddaughter, despite the fact that Joan had absolutely no involvement in the tragedy that befell this young girl's parents. And she was devastated. Devastated. No grandparents' rights.
Might that ever change?
Well, that's a legislative issue, and yes, if you feel strongly enough about it. And grandparents' rights never will trump parental rights. One of the other things that the court does is termination of parental rights. So anybody who abandons a child for more than 6 months, if paternity is established, it gets terminated. If somebody wants to place their child for adoption, you terminate the rights of the natural parents and allow for a legal recognition of the rights of the adoptive parents. That's one of the happiest days in family court. Those are the best cases, because who could not be happy about the formation of a family? I mean, that's the greatest. I want to do that.
Well, it depends on how long it took to form that family.
Yes.
If that child had been in foster care for years and years.
Indeed, but even that's a happy day.
Yeah, but when we had foster children, it was, who has the most rights, the parents, or a child in the future?
And again, that's why it's so critical that you meet your judicial candidates, because, we're called judges because we're given the ability to exercise our judgment. And when it's not clear who has more rights, guess who has to make that call? I mean, you have instant replay at sports. We don't have that in family court. The judge has to make a decision. And that's very heart-wrenching stuff. But you know what? If you make the right decision and you make a well-reasoned decision under the law, and I'm very much a follower of the law, the outcome will be a good one. I believe that with all my heart. Getting to that outcome, that might not be fun. Might not be easy to say the final determination, but the outcome will be right.
And now I'm really thanking God that my mother was able to adopt my 5-year-old son who I had with my husband, who is paranoid schizophrenic.
Mm-hmm.
And she is 75 now, and my son is 5 years old. And now the question that has arisen in my mind since you've been talking is, what are the chances or odds that actually see, because my daughter, who is 23 years old, said if anything happens to you, to my mother, that she would be willing to adopt my son, who is her little brother.
Were your parental rights terminated when your mother adopted?
Yes.
So that it's up to your mother to identify who she might nominate as the guardian of her now child. And guardianship is an inference that is made by the parent, and the court can name that nominee a guardian or can arrange for an adoption. I went into Chuck McGee's courtroom, if you remember Judge McGee, with a parent of 2 children whose partner had died. And this woman had no parental rights. She was a legal stranger to her own children she had raised. And I went into Judge McGee's chambers to get legal guardianship for her so she could make decisions for her own children. He said, Caren, go back to your office and draw up adoption papers. This is that child's mother. And we're not going to have any of this legal hurdles in place for her to have access as a parent. Now, that's a good judge. So there was a nomination that Joyce would be the parent, would be the guardian by the deceased parent.
So if my mother says that she thinks that would be a good idea, then possibly they might listen?
Absolutely. In Nevada Legal Services,
I'm not aware that she's aware that she needs to
No.
do that. I think they're just waiting for, like, my mother, you know, if my mother dies.
Nevada Legal Services has clinics
I'll adopt him.
that are in the newspaper, or you can call Nevada Legal Services, and family law clinics are some of the greatest things that I do. I do them as often as I can. And you just sign up, and the first one who signs up gets the first appointment, and you get 15 minutes with a lawyer who will help your mother to know what she needs to do, and maybe even give her a form so that she can nominate a guardian for that child upon her death.
So is there a form somewhere that I can get to show to her that this is what she...
I would encourage her to go to the Nevada Legal Services Clinic and get advice from a lawyer about her specific circumstances. There may be a form. I don't know of one, but they know a lot more than I do. But I'm not your lawyer. Well, I know that mental health issues are very individualized, and as they affect each of our lives, at some point, an awful lot of mental health issues touch our judicial system. For good or for bad, we are there as servants to the people. And the only time the court, not the criminal court, but the civil court, where I would be serving, is to intervene is when people can't solve their own problems, whether they're fighting about it or they just don't have the resources one way or another to get it done. And so go to the court as a resource saying, I need help resolving this problem, instead of that court is doing this to me. Say, I need the county to help me with my issues. And it's amazing how that simple change in perspective will change your satisfaction with the outcome that you're going to get in court. You don't always need a lawyer. 70% of family law cases are by unrepresented parties. And the judges need to be ready, willing, and able to deal with people in their real circumstances as people, not as problems, as people, and find those solutions. And I would be honored to do that in Washoe County. So thank you for having me.